welcome. As a proud nation, we're all celebrating India at 75. We all have our own definitions of freedom. We all have our own idea of India. But the common glue that binds all of us is the gratitude we have for our freedom fighters. The freedom fighters of this great country who fought against the British and gave our country her own foundation, her own identity, and her own free air. I'm joined by Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose's daughter on the broadcast on how she sees India's journey at 75, what are the things that worry her, and what are the values that make her proud about this India. And is the thin line between patriotism and nationalism blurring in this India of 2022? Anita Bose, ma'am, thank you so much for making time and speaking to Mirror Now. How do you see India at 75, from being a colony to now an emerging economic, cultural and diplomatic giant?
India has come a long way since 75 years of independence. And I think it has sort of established its own position in the world society and world economy. It certainly, in my opinion, is one of the five global players, along with the USA, with the European Union, with China, with Russia. I think India is one of the five big global players and certainly has a lot of influence. And on the other hand, I think compared to what the freedom fighters of those days expected, many of the problems that India faced then could not be solved completely, did not go away. And of course, others came about, some of them expected, at least as far as my father was concerned, and some maybe not so much at the forefront of interest at that time.
Right. Ma'am, Netaji's values and ideals are always relevant and cherished. What are some of his values that the youth of India can learn in current times?
I think, first of all, the youth today can learn not only from Subhash Chandra Bose, but many of the freedom fighters of those days, that personal dedication to a more general cause is of great importance, and that believing in a goal, you can very often achieve things which may seem to be very difficult. And of course, if you look at the challenges today, there are certainly enough things that young people today can sort of try to work towards. That is, even though the freedom fighters at the time might have expected poverty and illiteracy and ill health to be eradicated much sooner, I think this remains an ongoing task. And the young people today, along with their professional interests and their family concerns, should also dedicate themselves to society and to some of the societal challenges that remain. And I think each and every one can sort of contribute a little bit, some more and some less, to make the world a better place to be. And I think even India has a lot to look towards. For example, as a woman, of course, what concerns me very much is the fact that along with some of the very good achievements that India can claim, India also is not only the largest democracy in the world, but it's also the country which has the reputation of having the highest violence against women, which of course certainly would not have been a fact which Netaji would have approved of, because he was a great champion of gender equality and emancipation of all human beings. And the other aspect, of course, which I think would have been a great grief to him, was the fact that in the process of India gaining her independence, and the partition of India, so much violence occurs. And rather than sort of overcoming these problems, they have continued over the decades, and there continued to be violence between communal groups. If you think back of the attack on Sikh citizens in India after the assassination of Indira Gandhi, or other communal violence that did erupt. I think the young people, and for that matter also politics, should be able to do something to prevent such things, or at least reduce some of the tensions rather than sort of play on them.
Right. Ma'am, there's a very thin line and a very important line between patriotism and nationalism. How do you distinguish between the two? And do you think those lines have blurred in current times?
I certainly agree with you on that. I think to some extent, of course, patriotism and nationalism belong to a common phenomenon. But on the other hand, I think patriotism is the fair face of this, and nationalism can be a very ugly face of this. I mean, many countries have experienced that. For example, I live in Germany now, and Germany has a very bad history of nationalism during the Second World War, in fact, causing the Second World War in Europe at least. And when nationalism becomes a means to degrade and even to kill members of another nation or another community, it certainly is a part that we should try not to have any part in.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned that, ma'am. Our viewers would also like to know, what are some of the things about India that make you proud, and what are those factors that worry you?
Well, it makes me proud that India is what I would call one of the greatest reservoirs of brain power in the world. I mean, education did play an important role in India. On the other hand, I think we also experienced the fact that it was not that easy to get a decent education for everyone, and even today there are many people in India who are illiterate, who do not get an education, and particularly I think the girls in some communities have a more difficult time to realize their potentials in that respect, even though India does better than some of the other countries in Asia. And education, I think, is a key to development and hopefully also to understanding. I feel confident that this potential can create an improvement for the country as a whole. I am very, very worried about the fact that certain tensions between communities have not been contained, and if anything at all, I think some people play on them and try to exploit them. And usually it is a problem that the poorest and the most unfortunate suffer the most from such a thing, because those who are better off can sort of defend themselves against attacks and against crime and against violence. But it's usually the poorest who bear the greatest burden, and I think those who want to do something for their country should try to stand up against such developments.
Right. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time. And it's an absolute privilege to have you on Mirror Now. Thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you very much. Say Jai Hind to you and to all the listeners.
Jai Hind, ma'am. Jai Hind.